Time is now 6:10, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Um, Starting off, I'd like the chair. Waiting on the board director to.
Okay, you went mute, so I didn't hear you. You're asking for approval of the agenda.
Chair seeking the adoption of the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. I move to adopt the agenda as.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. It's been moved in second. If there is no further discussion, Ms. Graves?
Aye.
Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Director Kendrick?
Aye.
Director Townsend? Director McGee? Director Brooks?
Aye.
All right. Chair votes aye. Motion carries 5-0. All right. Moving on to 2.2, Vice President comments. Ms. Kendrick, you're muted. You're still muted. There you go.
Okay, trying to maneuver through my computer here.
Can I just Miss Peyton, can you stop screen share for Miss Kendrick's item? Thank you. That's fair.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to address Ms. Graves. We already had a private conversation, but I would like to publicly apologize to Ms. Graves as well, and to other directors and school staff for my demeanor at the previous meeting. As Vice President, it is my duty to set a good example of leadership and to respect each individual. In addition, I want to ensure that each director feels comfortable to ask questions and share his or her concerns. As we move forward, it is my job and President Watry's job to establish a more cohesive governance of our board and to be more effective leaders in our community. And thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Kendrick. All right. With that being said, if there's no further comments, we'll move on to 3.0, which is superintendent's comment. You have the floor.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Okay, excellent. You can stop screen sharing for a minute, Miss Peyton. I do have a couple items. One, I wanted to do a quick return to learn update for the public watching as well as for the board, of course. We did send a communication out yesterday regarding the next stage in the return to learn. We have great news, good news, great news that we've been able to foster a relationship, a partnership with Truman Medical Center, which will allow us to have all our staff who wish to vaccinated against the COVID-19 virus. And we've met with the group. We've toured the potential sites that we would use to facilitate that opportunity. And we're all set to go in terms of we're just waiting for them to get the go ahead to start those inoculations in terms of moving forward. What that'll allow us to do is to move a lot quicker once we return from yellow to green and get back to some semblance of normalcy. We anticipate that we will start the process in February. So I'm hoping to get a response in a week or two on the date, and we can implement that and get back to a regular schedule schooling in terms of in face-to-face. And that allows us to have more face-to-face than virtual to start. Once again, though, during this pandemic period, we are still offering our virtual and distance learning opportunities for parents, and our staff had done a survey previously to indicate numbers in terms of parents who wished for their students to return right away, and some who want to continue using the virtual option throughout the year. So this is good news. We'll be able to, start again with our staff in the safest position possible with vaccines, and then welcome our students back and get back to learning. So I wanted to share that with you. We'll keep you updated as we get information. We'll be updating staff as well in terms of their process. Many of our teachers are anxious, and not just our teachers, but our support staff are anxious to get into the buildings and start preparing for reentry of students. So we'll provide some opportunities in February for them to start setting up their classrooms and all those types of sort of school-based items. So with that, thank you. And any quick questions from board members, I'd be happy to take that on.
Mr. President, if I might ask and make a comment to the superintendent.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Obing, is there anything ethically wrong to encourage our families who have persons who meet the criteria over 65 underlying conditions to urge them to take the vaccine? As you probably know by now, and everyone else, that there's a reluctance on the part of Black folks to take the vaccine, and I understand why, and this kind of thing. I've had mine, thank God, but I think if that could happen, plus there's this is another subject. I just was reading or heard where there is some studies been done with one of the school districts. I want to think it was in Minnesota. Found that the kids who are returning to school, those families have less COVID than those who are at home. And I'm wondering whether that, and I heard you say February that we're going to try to go, and that's just around the corner. In fact, this next week. And so I wanted to share that, ask a question about that, with regard to taking the virus, being administered the virus, not the virus, but the vaccination. And the other is just you might have already heard that, I'm sure, as superintendent, that the word's gotten around that kids seem to do better, and plus do better. Of course, they're going to do better if they're in class.
Yeah.
But at the same time, where that those families tend not to come down with the COVID, as opposed to those who are staying at home.
Yeah. Thank you for that. There's a couple of points that you made, and this gives me an opportunity to kind of share some of that. First of all, let me just say in a legal perspective, we as an organization, we could mandate our staff to take the inoculation, first of all, but we've chosen at this point not to do that at this point. We're going to encourage people to do that. We will have a campaign and encourage people to do that. We know that there's some historical and political reasons for people of color and other people as well too, who are reluctant in taking the virus. We're going to be getting some literature from the Truman Medical Center around the vaccine and information around how it affects you and if you have challenges, and also a phone line where they can call the doctors personally, the center, and get information around that. So we will have a campaign encouraging all of our staff to take advantage of this great opportunities. I will personally be taking it, and I'll make sure we put a picture out when we once we start getting our administrators inoculated as well too. So I hope people are encouraged to do that. On the point around the safety of students, yeah, there has been some research done in this short period of time that when the proper precautions are taken at the school level, that students have been very safe at the school sites. Most of the contractions are not happening in school, it's happening elsewhere, and we can pass, and hopefully they practice that when they go to. So we will certainly be sharing that with our parents as we start to open up and try to alleviate some of the fears. I mean, it's real fears because we've been living in situations when people have been, we've had deaths every day. So I don't begrudge anyone for having those fears, but we'll continue to educate them through the science and through the medical center around information like that, and encourage people to educate themselves and then make a decision based on that. So that's where we're going. So I think we'll be in good shape. Most of the part, I've done some straw polls with staff, and right now I'm probably getting about 80% are saying yes, no, absolutely not. And we've got another percentage of people who either have to consult with their medical practitioner based on their own personal conditions, and people who might be a little bit fearful or kind of want to wait and see kind of thing. So I think once we start rolling out information, people might feel more confident and take advantage of the opportunity we have.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir.
I would also add, like Mr. Brooks, I too have had I've had my second shot. I think I provided Mr. Obing with photos so that if it needs to be distributed as a promotion to staff getting the vaccines, then we can do that. But I really thank you for your efforts on this and making sure that our teachers are not necessarily mandated, but are emphasized the importance of getting this done so we can get back into the buildings.
Thank you.
Just one other questions. Would board members be included in that vaccination list? I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, I haven't got deep into the technical piece, but it seems that you are part of the board. So I'm going to say 90% that you may get an invitation to join the lines with the rest of our staff, because you are part of our board as well too. But I also encourage anyone who's out there who's listening, who's not a member of our staff, that you go on to the Jackson County Health Department site and you can fill out your survey, quick survey, and then it'll put you in the line in terms of getting an appointment and start doing that. So that should be coming out. So if you haven't done that, you should do that as well. And so you take the first available opportunity that comes to you, right?
Okay. Is there any other comments from board members? All right, Mr. Obing, is there anything else, or we?
No, that's it. I just wanted to kind of reemphasize that bit of good news for us and move on to the next item. The next item, may I move? Or
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Okay. It's okay, Ms. Payton. I'm going to share my screen. So, thank you. This next item has to do. I've spent the first few months doing a entry plan to determine the strategic directive goals, and board members had received a draft June, I guess, and then I revised it again and sent some out, I guess, August and July. And thank you to those board members who gave me some input on steps around that, both in the sessions with MSBA and even prior to that and before that. So we've had some really good feedback from board members in terms of moving forward. But now here's the time. I spent some good analysis in doing this entry. I've collected a lot of information, and I wanted to share not just with the board, but with the public, some of the information that I gathered in order to outline our strategic directives and our next steps in moving Hickman Mills forward. So let me share my screen and so, there's quite a bit of content here, and I would have probably hundreds of pages of information that I would share, and I know that no one would read that. So I've worked really hard to try to condense it into small bites representing a lot of conversations and future actions that are measurable to the goals that we want to get to into this document that I hope that people will take an opportunity to read as we move forward. So I've kind of titled it Towards the Future We Want, because it's really about gathering information and defining the directives and the goals and our mission towards the future that we all want based on the information that I heard from all the partners that contributed. So let me go through it. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I will snippet certain nuggets and make some comments. And I'm going to stop probably about halfway through, and then next month we'll have an opportunity to the other half, because I know that it'll be more digestible if I take it in small chunks and give board members an opportunity to consider some things and give me some insight on what I'm sharing here. So the first page here just basically talks about our mission, where we want to go. On the left-hand column here, this is the framework for the entry. So these are the 5 strategic directive goal areas, and board members remember that when it was in draft form: student achievement, capacity development, culture, community connectedness, and resource management. Those are the areas that I've collected information and kind of put it into those goal areas and looked at our current state, where we are, and then identified some actions in terms of our future state. To the right here, advisory groups. I felt it was important to get a few small clusters of groups to ask some specific questions about the district in terms of what our current state is, what's happened in the past, and what's going on, and where do you think we need to go, and get any suggestions in terms of collecting that. I had a transition advisory committee, which was a group devised of community leaders, some legislators, politicians, some community advocates, some staff. It was just a small group, and I'll continue to meet with that group as we move forward to learn more about the district and to look at the next steps. We did have an innovation task force, and I was really pleased to see the turnout that we have. We've got on that group represented many different organizations that have thoughts around innovation for K-12 education in terms of working with our district and supporting, right from technologies to social skills, social emotional kind of, and that task force continues to meet, and we will bring forward some actions when we're ready to do that. I did get an opportunity, even though we were in COVID, figured out a way to have some focus groups with students, both at the middle school and at the high school level. Didn't do elementary, just to hear from them, wanted to hear the student voices in terms of what they thought of district and where they thought would help in terms of moving forward. And we had that, and you'll see in my plan later on around some student voice action that I think we need to be moving in a direction of more. And then finally, the other piece that kind of helped me kind of drill down, because it's, it's easy just to go out and just gather all kinds of information, but I want to kind of put it into buckets that can be used to organize in a way I can measure progress in some of these areas and be able to come back and talk about them and also apply the resources that are needed. So these are the 5 points of objectives. If board members, you receive my draft, there's about 20 pages of nuggets of different actions, right? And so these are those nuggets. These are just the categories of the nuggets that you received. And it's about building collaboration and relationships, internal communications. So looking at how we do our communication, how do we have high visibility of myself as well as board members and also stakeholders, and listening around. And it's challenging during COVID because this is unusual times where we're not connecting with people physically, but we have to use virtual means. So did learn a lot from that. And then sort of setting the stage around the expectations that I want to put forward for our staff, our community, and other partners who want to join us. Operations, organizations. So one of the things I did do is take a good analysis, look at our operations side. There's the academic side of our organization, and then there's the corporate side. They do converge at some point, but there is an opportunity to look at financial accountability, human resources, achievement and priorities relating to cost benefits. Are we investing in our investment? Are we getting the kind of results we want? And just potential growth in terms of our district. So that's kind of the framework. So let me get into some of the analysis for you here. So looking at district demographics, so our student enrollments, you can see the numbers there based by each of the panel areas. And right now, in comparison to the demographic stuff we've done in the past, this is an atypical year because we're in COVID, and our enrollment has been pretty good. But it is virtual, so we're not sure exactly if those numbers continue to stay that way. But next year will be the true story of what our numbers look like when we get students into classrooms again. Or I should say, we might start looking at that in a couple of months if we're able to get everybody back into a full green schooling. But those are the student demographics. I was eager to share this with you as well too. Sort of digs a little bit deeper into the ethno-cultural demographic pieces, and you can see that based on the information that we collected, 69% students identified themselves as Black, 13% Hispanic, 9% is white, and then there's a good percentage here of multiracial, which encompasses, and then there's the other group, another 3% that identify themselves other than these categories here. But to your right, I've kind of clustered out in terms, I want to kind of let everybody know that we are quite diverse in terms of first languages in our districts, right? So here are the top 20, we have 20 different languages in our district. And I'm not sure if it's big enough to see in the screen there, but we've got everything from Spanish to Urdu to Punjabi, Creole. We've got a wide range of different languages spoken from our students, and it looks like we've got the trend is that that's going to continue to grow in terms of the diversity of our students. But I wanted to share that and take a look at that. So that'll have some impact on down the road in terms of how we do programming for first language learners and things like that as well too. So. And then get to the listening tour. So this is where I had engaged in group conversation, individual conversation, both Zoom, had a couple of face-to-face in different settings, but because of COVID, we're trying to get away from that, especially as we got into the year. And I wanted to share with you some data from that, right? So I've had over 1,300 individual conversations. I've had a lot of conversations, a lot of talking, but I've been trying to do a lot more listening than talking, than speaking, because it's supposed to be a listening tour. And you can see the types of groups that we engaged. So we had about 35 different community groups ranging from all kinds. Could be people who are business people, business groups, chambers, right to social organizations that work with our schools, both locally in the region and also state and some national that have an impact on schools around. So group forums, about 26 different group forums, 21 school staff meetings. So this was what I really enjoyed. I've met with every staff in our district and some almost one-on-one as well too, and had a protocol in terms of questions and things I wanted them to share, but also really wanted to give them an opportunity to tell me what they think about the district and what they feel we need to do in terms of remove. It was quite enlightening, and I learned a great deal and gave me some ideas around our strategy moving forward. So had that opportunity, even though we were in virtual. Legislative contacts, have been about 11 different legislative contacts. Parent PTO contacts, we had 8. I'd hope we'd have more. So that was right away an area of need in terms of parent engagement and how parents play a role in our schools and what voice they have. So that was one that hit me right away. And then student focus groups, we talked about that. But I'll tell you, when I did speak with the staff, I used a start, stop, continue protocol, if you've had that experience before. And so questions about what things we need to start doing in our district, what things we should stop doing, and then what we should continue doing. Rather than sharing all the data for all the different pieces, I wanted to share the one that was most impactful. And I put it into a Wordle, a word collage, as the most prominent word that was getting the feedback is most prominent on this slide here. And this category of continue seemed to be the one that people were most energetic about in terms of the things that we're doing that we need not to lose, that we want to continue doing. People spoke a lot about the resources, about getting resources, and especially because we're in COVID, technology was a big piece, and they allotted the district's past planning and ensuring that they had the tools to go right into virtual education. So a lot of kudos to our curriculum department and our IT department for having the foresight to have those equipment in place, but then also having the process to implement it. Even today, we've got the drive-through help center kind of thing. You can call in and get information. So teachers also commented about how they felt they were advantaged over other districts who were just trying to get up the game in terms of just getting the hardware equipment. And our teachers have become very skilled at using the hardware that we have. Training, they talked about the training and that they received in the district, and also said they wanted more training on specific areas around instruction and capacity building, and there's more collaboration among grades to do that. Phone is buzzing. Partnerships, people really like the partnerships we have with businesses and among schools and individuals and all sorts of organizations. There are a lot of partnership opportunities for our students and our staff to connect with people outside. And then you can kind of look at the whole thing. I won't read it all to you, but there are a number of words that stick out. People talked about team and voice, both getting opportunity to get voice and certain areas where they needed more voice, but also trauma came through in terms of the training that's needed to deal with issues of trauma and having trauma-informed professional development. So that's the continue piece, and I'd be happy to share with the board if they want to hear the stop and the start pieces, but some of that I've kind of incorporated in some of the actions as well too. So let me stop there, take a breather, and see if any board members have any questions about the first couple pages analysis and the tour piece with all the communication pieces. Any comments?
Mr. Obing, I just have a question in regards of resources and looking at the bigger words. I know that you said it was geared towards mostly towards COVID. What are some of the resources that were particular that people kind of brought to your attention?
Yeah, no, well, what I meant by COVID was a front of mind for people because we're in the situation. You know, people
Right.
respond to what their need, and there was a lot of conversation around technology and things like that. But for the most part, people talked about they want to continue training around issues of equity. They wanted continued training around instructional strategies to help our students going. They wanted training about how to deal with some of the social emotional challenges that we have among our students and in our communities as well too. At the same time, it's a double-edged sword because people also said those are things that are going well and they just want more of
Right.
those things. But those are some of the big pieces that came out in that conversation.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So seeing none questions, I will proceed. All right. So I really struggled about how to present this piece because we did a survey and it was open to anyone in the community, staff, students, board members, community members. And I know some board members did go on, so thank you to give us that data as well too. And so what I've done here is the responses, I've just highlighted the top 3 responses in order to make it digestible for people to kind of read. And it kind of, hopefully you see these and most of them, you're not surprised that, oh, okay, yeah. But there'll be some that might be, wow, I didn't think that. And that's for us to kind of think about in terms of next steps and actions. So where would you like to see an increased area of focus in 2020-21 school year? I think people talked about this more holistically just beyond 2021, but reading, literacy, instruction, that was the highest indicator for sure. Culture and climate. So to continue to develop the culture and climate of the district. And then attendance. Attendance has been an issue in the past. And so people want us to continue to focus on. Of course, we're in COVID, so we're still having challenges with attendance in terms of sometimes kids show up, but they don't actually engage in the work as well. Where do you believe our obstacles of student achievement engaged? So I wanted to find out where people thought that the challenges were in terms of student achievement before we started putting actions in place, right? See what they missed. So people talked about social emotional needs and supports, that was a predisposing factor in the achievement. They talked about economic status. They talked about mental health, right? So some of the things that were even in that Wordle that jumped out. So really for me, it sounds like people are talking about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of our students and our staff having these social, emotional, and nutritional needs in order to be mentally well to engage in the work. So, and that came through pretty clear around how do we support our students and staff around that. What are qualities in teachers you would like to see? So I was interested to hear what our parents and community members would say about, things like classroom management and discipline and things like that. So they like to see classroom management. Of course, they want to see classrooms that are well managed and controlled, and that's going to be a sort of a cooperative thing, because teachers need to do their part and support staff as well, but our students need to ensure that they are exhibiting to support the teachers so they can effectively give instruction as well too. Instructional strategy, so that's come through a couple of times in terms of building the capacity of our teaching staff to be able to meet the needs of our students, right? Communication with parents. Okay, so that must have come from a lot of parents wanting that communication. Although I've heard there's been pretty good communication during the COVID period in terms of the communication back and forth. And so there's probably some things we've learned in this virtual setting, how we could do a better job of keeping parents informed and engaged about what's happening in their child's classroom. And what is an opportunity to attract highly qualified staff? So resoundingly, people talk about salary increase, right? So that was a big one. Positive work environment and benefits, right? So they've talked about that in terms of those are things that are coming from. And that's a combination between staff and community. And I will talk a little bit more about this in detail in the other directive goals that we've identified, and possibly in how we can move forward with that. What resource would you like to see readily available? Well, this matches the other question, right? So people want to see more social emotional supports, mental health supports, housing and homeless supports. So our staff were acutely aware of the transient nature of some of our students, not all of our students, but that being a factor in our district in terms of how do we support not just the students, but also the families, right? To ensure that students can feel good about coming to school and do well. I know we've got a lot of partners already working on this, but there seems to be an opportunity to still continue to do some better coordination. When you walk into an HMC1 facility, what do you hope to see or feel? Okay, so I want to get an idea of what people think, because this will be good input for Mr. Weekly in terms of our facilities pieces, right? What people want to see and feel around that. So people want to see a focus on students' success. So that's the first thing, right? And that's what I look for when I walk into schools. I want to see examples of student success, whether if it's work on the walls or pictures of students or students in learning centers doing work, but student success. They want to see a sense of pride, and they want to see clean facilities, right? So hopefully none of that really surprises you, but those are the top three. And I said there's about 6 or 7, but those are the top 3 that come through. What is your primary method of engaging with HMC1? So this was really, I was hoping that parents would respond to this, and school district communications, right? So that's their primary contact so communication from the district was their number one primary contact, or directly from their school through email, actually. Website, so people do go to our website, and I know we're doing some work to kind of even improve that even more, so it'll be more inviting. People can find information they need through there. And then of course, in this day and age, social media and Facebook is the next rung where people get their information. So that's what the respondents said in the survey. So what is your preferred method of communication? So then we get a little deeper. So email is number 1, right? So, about 20 years ago, it wouldn't be email for sure. It'd be paper and stuff like that. And I thought it would have been maybe social media is the preferred method, some sort of social, but email. So people seem to like the emails from the district or from their schools, giving them exactly what they want. Of course, usually connected to some links to other further information, things like that. They also like the text messages. Almost everyone has some sort of device now and has it readily available, whether they're at home or so. Text messages and a phone call. They want a phone call, and they don't want a phone call just for there's something negative happen, but they want the sunshine calls as well too, in terms of And I think we've been working on that. I know some of our staff and our principals have been making those calls during the COVID, just to check up on not just academically, but socially, in terms of making sure our students are well and their families are well as well. What do you believe are the obstacles to student achievement and engagement? I think that got duplicated. We kind of talked about that already, those three categories. What area would you like to see more financial resources invested? Okay, so people want to see more resources into classrooms, and then more support around social support for students. And then I said technology, of course. I think because of the time we're in, people kind of technology is probably front of mind. But of course, we're in the 21st century. Technology changes at the rate of 4 months, every 4 months. And, you know, often at the school level, we're kind of behind by a little bit in terms of doing that. So we want to keep that and make sure our students leave us and graduate with the requisite skills to go into whatever pathway they choose after that. How do you want to receive information about HMC1's budget? So I wanted to know if people are aware of our financial structures and understood our budget, and people want an email. They like seeing it in a newsletter. So I guess we could do updates for our audits and things like that in the newsletters and the financial statements and things like that. And then of course, the website. So we need to ensure as we change the website to have a presence where people can go and look at all things budget or finance if they're interested in digging deeper into that. And these are graphics of our students demonstrating success in many different genres there. Okay, so I'm almost there. And so the next stage, so these are the strategic directive goals that we said, the 5 ones that I mentioned. And I'm gonna go through 2 of them and then stop, because I think it's worthy of some reflection and some conversation before I share the other graphics in another day. So this first one is around achievement. And what I tried to do, and this was quite challenging too, I was trying to get as much information in one page as possible without giving you layers and layers of pages. But I wanted to talk about what our current state is. Where are we right now in terms of achievement in Hickman Mills School District? And then what's our future state? Where do we want to go based on the conversations and information I've received, what our future state is, and hence the title, Towards the Future We Want, right? So in terms of the current state, right now, we are accredited. We're accredited through Advance Ed, which is a national accreditation. In many districts in many different states usually follow that, and some states that don't do accreditation at the state level use that to validate their schools, and it's usually quite intense. And we're going to continue to do that to keep that level up. At the Missouri state level, we are partially accredited and looking quickly to make that change. And then I put in here some of the data, some of our data, achievement data. I didn't really want to pull out pages and pages. There's all kinds of ways to share that data in terms of state data, our own formative data in our schools that are district-wide, and then we have some summative data that we can use as well too. But those people who are really interested in looking at our current state, you can click on this and it'll take you to a database of more data, and you can drill down into all different categories. Look at previous years as well too, and see where we've been. You can see what's happened at the state level in terms of our scores. So we're on our way towards full accreditation, and it seems to keep changing the process around that, and we're re-engaging them again. So under the future state, of course, our main goal is to get full accreditation. And as I mentioned in the last board meeting, I've been having several conversations with the state staff. I met with the Commission of Education twice since I've arrived here about Hickman Mills and what we could do, what we need to do. And I've met with the deputy commissioner as well too, and other state representatives in terms of how do we look and what strategies we have to employ to do that. And so we're working on that piece. They're changing their framework of validating districts who are partially accredited, especially now with COVID. That adds a wrinkle into it because we don't have the same assessment to compare back, which is unfortunate for us because I think we would have had an opportunity this year to demonstrate some pieces. Nevertheless, we continue to work and working with them to figure out ways that we can do that. I intend on pulling together our teams to come together around the framework that they're coming out with in order to make sure that we have the evidence to prove that we deserve to be fully accredited. And I did mention at the last meeting that it's not only the student achievement data they're looking at, but they're also looking at governance, board governance, and the structures of governance and what you're doing. And I think the board's on its way in doing that work with the training we've done and some of the cleanup we're doing with board meetings. But they're also having a really fine focus on financial structures. Fortunately, we had a good clean audit, so that was good. That'll bode well for us. But we do need to do some structuring around the financial structure and help the board have mechanisms to do the monitoring. And I hope to present some information, hopefully February, if not February, early March, to start looking at the financial management system that the board can say, okay, this is what we're using to monitor that. And I think that'll look favorably from the state that we've got something in place and we're taking proactive action to improve our students' achievement through allocating resources. Instructional program delivery model, I really feel we need to do a good look on what our instructional practices are and coordinate it so it's systemic around it. We've got lots of good practice already. I mean, we're in COVID right now, so hasn't been the same as regular, so I haven't seen face-to-face. But I know that some of the things I do know is that we need to ensure we introduce culturally relevant pedagogy, and that's where some of the training comes in. I think we need to start doing training around specific strategies to support our students, continue the capacity development of our staff, and perhaps use a cultural proficiency framework. I'm not sure we've used that in the district, but we need to get all the coordinated around special ed, EL needs to kind of come together in terms of having a plan that everyone's kind of on board moving forward. But one of the things I really do think we need to outline is what's our graduate profile, right? What can we say is a HMC1 graduate, and have that profile and we work backwards, right? So if we have some of the things that we want to think about is holistic critical thinking and problem solving, cross-cultural understanding and civic engagement, effective communication, problem solving skill, whether if it's scientific problem solving or just real world problem solving, curiosity and creativity. We don't want to lose that. STEAM, I think it's almost a necessary byproduct to engage in some high level STEAM programming in our district. I know we don't have a lot of right now enrichment programming. I think we could get there because I want to close the gap but continue to raise the bar. So it doesn't mean that we close the gap from the bottom. We're going to continue to raise the bar and close the gap, and that means providing programming there. It's going to be stimulating, enriching, and also preparing our students for the 21st century. We have a lot of organizations around us that can support us in the technology and engineering section that I know we're taking some advantage of right now, and we want to continue to leverage that as we move forward. Assessment and benchmarking. This, other than salary increases, this is probably the most significant item that I received from staff around assessment and benchmarking, how we do that. And I know there's been work in recent times to improve on that. And I've gotten, feedback. Most people, we do need to review it. People have talked about, maybe it's too much and we're spending more time on doing the assessing stuff and less time on actual instruction. And in some schools, they're starting to revise that and improve on that. But we need to kind of look at it holistically as a district and have a systemic approach into, okay, which assessments we're going to do and how do we do benchmarking? And that also has to align with our proposal we'll be giving to the state when we're looking at accreditation around how we do that. So both formative and summative assessment, what we need to consider that. So this is certainly worthy of a conversation in terms of where we can go. I wanted to, based on the conversation I had and what I've seen, pathways to success. As an educator and most people in schools and teachers came through a certain pathway, high school, college or university, and then your work. But that's only one pathway. And we know that the general population has 25 to 28% of people who have university, college degrees. What about the other 70%? right? There are all kinds of trades and occupations and other pathways to success through apprenticeships, workplace internships, and other post-secondary opportunities that schools traditionally don't do a really good job of offering that. And that's because most of the instructors have a certain pathway, the university pathway, and that's what we know, we feel, but we need to kind of ensure that we're servicing the other part of our students to give them those opportunities. There are lots of employability opportunities out in the real world that that's beyond being a doctor or a lawyer in terms of doing that. And there's lots of trades and opportunities. And there are a lot of organizations in our community that want to connect with us and give those opportunities as well too. So I think we need to take a harder look at the pathways and how we do that and offer those opportunities. I know there are some opportunities out there, but we need to let people know it's okay to take an apprenticeship and look at that as after high school. I want to become this. I'm going to go right into this kind of work, or to go into a workplace and to get internships. And of course, innovation. I have struck in an innovation task force, so we'll be talking and looking at innovative opportunities for our district. And one of the things I don't want our staff to become is innovation or initiative fatigue, right? You get the next best idea all the time. We can't do that. We really do have to kind of stop some things, prioritize, and say, this is what we want to do, and be able to apply to that. But I know and I believe there are people out there who want to help us be successful that can join in that. And educational equity, continue to implement intervention strategies that address issues of race and socioeconomic status. I've talked to staff about the equity lens I have, and my equity lens is very inclusive, that looks at from race to sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, Indigenous, First Nations people. So I want our staff to introduce those conversations with our students. But in our district, the most prominent sort of indicators that come out is around race and socioeconomic. So we need to ensure that the intervention strategies we do accounts for that, and we can support building capacity with our students to be successful in those very areas. Often equity seeking or equity actions end up being positive outcomes for everyone, right? So think about that. I'll give you a quick example. A real world example is that when you're walking on the sidewalk, the ramps go down so you can step down, right? And that was initially put in there for people with wheelchairs, right? If you walk around the street on a summer day or something, you'll see individuals with bicycles using that ramp. You'll see parents with strollers. You'll see individuals with canes. So now it's benefiting more than just a targeted group, because it was a good initiative that was conducive for success for people. Okay. Let me stop after that one, see if there are any affirmations, comments, or questions from any of our board members in this category.
Comment on one of the issues you talked about, and that was classroom management. We often have teachers who have been teaching many years, and some that are just starting, and when they come into our district, and many of them end up leaving because they don't have the skills to manage the classroom. I think that should be a really a big thing. You know, we assume if you've been teaching for X amount of years that you know how to manage your class, but you know, we have a different kind of students now. You know, Johnny's not going to be quiet just because you ask him 10 times.
That's right.
So you have to, I don't know what's wrong with my video. Did somebody stop it? I tried to, I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, you've got
I
your
didn't
video
do
blocked, so I don't know. It's blocked.
Well, somebody, I tried to.
It's okay. I can hear you perfectly, Ms. Graves. Oh, there you
Okay,
are.
see, there it is. Okay. Mhm. So I think that's really a key to work with teachers and them to get those classrooms, you know, under control. And the second thing I think is important is making sure that we get communication out to our parents. Several years ago, Hickman Mills, they probably had more money, but they sent communication out to everybody, you know, in the Hickman Mills area. I know it's too expensive to do that, but oftentimes people really don't know what's going on, in our district. They don't come to the board meetings, and some of them might not have email, phone might be, it's just different things. So, getting, using mechanisms to make sure that, the stakeholders know what's going on. I think those are two things that we need to look at, as well as the others, but especially classroom.
No, you're right, though. You're right. Classroom management is just not about brand new teachers. It's about all of us, right? And
Right.
some of the other items, like in one of the other categories around culture, I'll talk a little bit more about that, what I think some of the things we need to do systemically to kind of lay that foundation. You're right. Even back in my days, teachers would say that the kids aren't the same now. It always changes, it seems like, right? So we continue to do that. All right, and the communication there, I heard you about the communication piece. Okay, any other comments?
I do, Mr. President, if I might.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Obin, first of all, I like your style. You brought a lot to the board in the last 8 or so months. Unfortunately, you came in when the pandemic was really midway. It has not let up. Instead, it's gotten worse, and we're not sure where it's going to go in the next few months. But saying all that, it's going to be. I'm concerned about whether or not the DESE or the letters for the school board group.
DESE?
And all the other
MSBA?
Yes. Whether or not any.
Hey, there's too many acronyms here in Missouri. Like, there's way too many acronyms.
Yes. I wonder whether or not any discussion has been made, going on as to how do you started July 1 of 2020.
Yeah.
How effectively can the board evaluate these 5 principles or so that you mentioned to give you a fair and equitable evaluation? And I'm not sure, I don't want to tie that up in a lot of discussion, but at least that's something I think that yourself and the board need to have some discussion on, because I think, I appreciate you. I appreciate how you reached out to these various organizations, being a newcomer to the community. That's very significant when I look at those that you reached out to. I'm surprised, and I'm going on whether to have you respond to that. I'm surprised that in the discussion, no one talked about our mobility rate. According to our demographic study several years ago, we have about a 61% mobility rate that impacts upon how well we can teach kids. I mean, you can't teach them if they're not there. And if you're getting a new crop of kids in during the semester, it's going to be difficult for them to come right to the classroom, because many of them have been out of school. Many of them have been, the study that they had at the last school may not coincide with the one that they were in now. So I'm a little surprised that didn't go. Another thing is I'm a little surprised, and maybe it's because those persons who were in the discussion didn't know, but according to our demographic study, 30% of the kids who are eligible or should be in Hickman School District are not going to school in the Hickman School District. That's a pretty good number when you say 4,500 kids or so. 30% of that is a pretty good number. And the question becomes, I don't think we can do anything about the mobility rate, but I think that those kids who ought to be in Hickman C-1 ought to be going here. And I can understand why some parents would say, well, I can send my kid to University Academy or Frontier or Kaufman, because where they can get a quote unquote good education. I understand what they're saying. So that's just a couple of comments I had. And I know that I'm just wondering whether or not there's been some discussion at a level as to, because I would assume that most superintendents around the state are following the fiscal year of the school district, and July 1 to June 30th. And that means evaluation time for their superintendents. Even if you come mid-year, I would assume that you extend it until that time. And so that concerns me. I won't be around to mark an X on you, but I am, of course, interested in fairness and equity and understanding of where we've been, where we're trying to go, and who we got to take us there, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. You had a lot to contribute there. I'll just say, first of all, that, yeah, you know, it has been a concern with superintendents around and districts around during a pandemic year. It's not usual. So everyone's kind of been all hands on deck, just trying to keep the ship afloat. So evaluations are going to look different this year, right? In terms of doing that. And I guess the most important thing is ensuring that the districts are still running and we've got a stable platform to re-enter kids in. That's been the major goal for everyone, really, in terms of doing that, both across the nation, if not just around the Kansas City area. But I will say that people did talk about the mobility rate, and I've actually had conversations with the state about the mobility rate and the impact on our assessment. And so they're aware of that, and we're having conversations in terms of how do they equate that in their analysis and their assessment. So they're aware of that, and they haven't lost that. And once again, I said, I didn't put every single thing that everybody said on this document because it would be overwhelming. It was overwhelming for me to figure out how to just, you know, mention. So I just thought I wanted to kind of at least have some articulated pieces that people can see that, okay, I heard some of the pieces and this is where we're going. But I appreciate your support and I appreciate your comments. And I do believe that we have the foundation, if we do some of the right things, to be a district of choice where people will start coming. I think we're seeing it already, even in virtual. There's a lot of parents I have spoken to that said they stuck with us because of our virtual plan, right? So that's a good thing, right? So we want to kind of build on that, and we have to support our support staff and our teachers to continue to provide excellent service so we can talk about it in positive ways and encourage people to come. So we build it, they will come.
Yes, oh yes.
So, all right. All right. I'm going to move on. So this will be my last slide for today. We can continue to come. So here, and this kind of hits to some of the things that some of the board members have talked about. So this CT directive goes around capacity development, right? And when you look at the current state, now this was very shocking to me when I saw this. In our teacher salary rankings, I'm going to blow this up a little bit bigger. Ms. Graves talked about teachers leaving for management and trying to employ, so that all that goes into this as well in terms of you look at this is the analysis that we were able to pull up in the districts, the 9 districts in our area. Our starting salary for our teachers, we're at the bottom. We are last, dead last. I don't like to be last. There's no way we should be last with what we've got. So we've got to certainly work on some strategies to invest in our staff, to show them that we appreciate them and we're giving them a fair wage to compensate them for their efforts, right? I think we will be able to retain more individuals. I've heard countless stories of really good teachers who've chosen to go. Not in one of the things when I've talked with staff, I thank the staff who have stayed, because there are many people who could go elsewhere for considerably more dollars, but they really invested in the community, so they've stayed here. So you can see on this chart here, just for everyone to see where we are in our starting salaries. So we're at the bottom here. You got Lee Summit at the top. And I think there are ways that we can do when when we come back and share some of the financial management structure, I think there's ways that we can talk with our staff to increase this. But the shocking thing was it's not only at the teacher level, it's pretty much across the board, right? And if we are valuing our staff this way, then they're going to think a certain way, and it's not going to be a surprise that parents are going to think that we've got the bottom of the barrel and they're going to choose to go elsewhere. So that 30%, Mr. Brooks, you're talking about, that's part of this conversation. When you have good teachers leaving and things like that, we have to really engineer something sooner than later to improve it up. So even under our non-union staff, and these are union staff, the teachers and others, non-classified staff also rank at the bottom of pay and benefits. So increasing our staff is a necessary strategy to sustain our goals here. So you will see, I know the board has already charged me with looking at this issue, but we'll be coming around soon with some strategies I think we can do to improve this. I know this is more of a closed session conversation to go into details, but I wanted everyone to kind of know where we are and as a board, we can have a conversation and close doors in terms of strategies we can use to improve this. So in our future state, we want to go from the bottom to salary improvements for our staff, right? And you know, some of these directives I'm sharing with you, these goals I put out here, these are not 1 year goals. That's why I've gone in such depth. You know, I don't think it's enough to come out and do analysis and set a goal for 8 months. At the end of the 8 months, the board goes through that again. We need to kind of be visionary in terms of that's our jobs as head of the agencies and head of the enterprise, to think about 2 to 5 years out. How do we plan for the district to continue to grow? So many of these goal action items that I have here are things that we're going to develop, implement, review, monitor, and sustain over the next few years to get us to the top where we need to be. One area that I also heard about was leadership stability. This came through. We need to develop really good succession planning and retention planning. Both leadership, we're talking at the administrative level, and also superintendents as well too. I mean, people often tell me, well, I've had 3 or 4 superintendents in the last 4 or 5 years. And if you do the research and you look at districts that have had success, there's stability there, right? And not just saying just in superintendents, but administrative level, but also at the board level. So I encourage board members to hopefully think about serving more than 1 term, right? That adds that stability, right? Because then you have some continuity in terms of understanding, and you can work on the next initiatives. If we're having turnover with our superintendents, turnover with our administrators, and turnover with our board members, then we're still going to be like, you know, trying to figure it out every time and taking a step back before. So we need to look at some good succession planning and retention around the district and school board leadership as we move forward. Internal culture, working with our HR department, we got to put some actions in so we become the employer of choice, right? Both from equity opportunity and also our benefits and programs we offer for individuals to come here, and continue to develop professional partnerships with many of the community partners that we have, and offer incentives and opportunities for our staff to grow and want to live here as well too with their families, and encourage others to support the district. So that's the big capacity development piece, and I'll stop there for any sort of affirmations or comments, and then I will wrap this up for tonight and continue in the next session.
Mr. President, if I might.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Obing, for your information, and I think Ms. Graves and I might be the 2 persons who've been on the longest. And Ms. Graves, did we not, and I think we did this publicly, we went over this salary of the 10 districts in our orbit, did we not? Ms. Graves? I think we did, Mr. Obing. I think we went, and it was public, we went over these, and we've tried, and it bothers us, you can be sure, and that we are at the bottom when it comes to salaries for teachers, beginning as well as at the top end. But one of the things when you're at the bottom like this, and in all due respect to all the teachers that we have, they're doing the best that they can. You attract young, right out of school teachers who are teachers, and many of them aren't suitable for the particular subject matter, but we hire them because we have those vacancies there, and their tenure is very short, because once they get there, they realize that this ain't what I thought it was going to be, and we lose them too. And what we do, we find ourselves hiring teachers who don't have the experience, and particularly when you have the culture that we have, and therefore it makes it very difficult all the way around to do that. And so I certainly am with you, and was one of the ones who was harping about we can't be last all the time, and we got to raise it up. But it shows now that we are still at number 9, and I think there are 10 schools in our orbit. But nevertheless, it's good that you're taking this on as a challenge, and it is a challenge. And the question becomes, where do we get the money to move ourselves up to mid-range at least, and then eventually up to the top?
I'm hoping to provide the board with the tools to find those dollars. I'm pretty confident we can do it. And you know what? It's actually not if we can do it. We have to do it.
You have to.
With the state that we're in, we're going to continue to decline. We just lost a teacher last week. Great teacher. Had a conversation teacher and had nothing to do with district. It just she was a good teacher, so people come recruiting. She had a great opportunity to have more income for her family. I can't blame her for that.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's just going to continue. And we also have a tipping point. We do hire those young teachers in about year 4 or 5. So we look at this data. That's when they leave. Right. Once they kind of get their bones, right. First year, you get kicked around by the kids, you start to develop. Then year 4, you're kind of, okay, you're feeling good enough that, oh, okay, I see something over here. I can go and do that. So I think this is a must. We got to figure out a way to do this. And working with our finance officer and our human resources person, we've been coming up with some strategies. And I hope to kind of bring something to the board in a timely fashion to start the continued conversation to take some immediate steps to.
My last comment, if I might, Mr. President, my last comment with regard to this is that this also is reflected in our achievement level. When you have stability of teachers who've been around, who know the students, who develop a relationship with the students, rather than someone coming in and say, I'm your new teacher this year, and someone who doesn't stay but 2 or 3 years, where there is no stability, and actually knowing the family, knowing the student is impact, in my belief, not an educator, one that impacts how we are in terms of the product that we're turning out. And that's our students.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Mr. Watry, I know President Watry, I've taken more time.
It's okay.
Than I did plan to stop at this point regardless anyways. And next month, I'll be happy to look at the culture piece. That gets to some of the questions board members had about the discipline and stuff like that. And community connections and our plan for branding the district in a very positive light, and then resource management. So the operational side of our district in terms of what we need to do and how we can generate some revenue and minimize our expenditures and continue to resource allocate our staff to have success for our students. So with that, I turn it back over to you, President Watry.
Well, first thing I would like to say is thank you. Thank you for your in-depth analysis of the district and the community, and being able to look at what we're going to need moving forward. Sorry, excuse me. And within that, looking, and I was able to review your document entirely, looking at the changes and reforms you wish to make with culture, the approach in which you want to make with ultimately an overall paradigm shift in our ability to be innovative in the future. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that someone has come in and been able to kind of look at and assess. I'm a strong advocate in the aspect of meeting people where they're at to get them where they're going. And I appreciate you taking the effort to kind of meet the district where it's at so that we can see where we can go.
Thank you. We all want to work towards the future we want, right?
Right.
Not we, it's all of us.
The one thing I did want to kind of hint on was I think the salary improvements, the leadership stability, the improving the culture, as well as the professional partnerships. I can honestly speak, and I'm just taking this time just to speak on this personally. I think, personally, one of the reasons why I was able to join the board and not necessarily stay an employee was due to my inability to advance professionally, as well as the salary issues that were in place, and looking in the possibility of looking at professional partnerships to ensure that people can advance. The biggest example I give of this, and I'm only drawing from personal experiences, with our FSLs and our transitional case managers. A lot of them are either bachelor's level or some of them are graduate level counselors, LPCs, social workers, yeah, pretty much come from a helping profession. The availability to look into partnerships, professional partnerships that promote professional advancement, especially when it comes to social emotional skills, which is their area of expertise. I think you looking into that just makes me feel better. Just moving forward as we plan to take more emphasis on creating stability, not just in our culture, but just also in overall. So thank you. With that being said, is there any other board members who have any more discussion regarding the strategic directive goals? All right. With that being said, thank you again, Mr. Obing, and we'll move to item 4.1, which is board governance and evaluation. I brought this item to the agenda after reviewing Mr. Obing's directive goals and our last conversation at our last meeting. We talked a lot about evaluations. Mr. Brooks even hinted the superintendent evaluations and what it would take for us to do that. Within the last meeting that was discussed, we talked about how board governance is a precipitating factor to our accreditation. With that being said, I would like for us to try to and also for the public as well as for shareholders, staff, and the public as a whole to be able to make sure that we are doing what we need to do as board members to move our district forward. And I know that requires also for us to be evaluated. I know that superintendents tend to be evaluated on an annual basis. With our accreditation looming, and with the current state, the pre-COVID state that we're in, and now during the state that we're in, I'm suggesting that we possibly go to monthly evaluations for the board. I don't know what that looks like right now, but I wanted to bring that to the board. I wanted the board to hear that and see if there is any discussion regarding a monthly evaluation process for the board to make sure that we're doing a good job in upkeeping our responsibilities, making sure that we're remaining confident in our abilities to govern. And would also like the assistance of this administration, as well as MSBA, if possible, to assist us with formatting or creating that monthly evaluation and what that would look like. Just leaving it to discussion at this point. If no one has anything to add, coming the following month. Well, actually, Carla, are you on the line? I want to ask a question before I switch topics.
I am. I'm having so many problems with my internet. That's why I've got my video off, because I'm having connectivity issues, but I'm here.
It could also be me. I'm working off a hospital Wi-Fi, which is shoddy at the least. So the question I have was, would it be advantageous for us to more or less commission or look into with the staff looking at a monthly board evaluation and coming back with that the following month? Like, would it be something that we would have to vote on, or is it something that we can just wait to discuss in the following month?
It's okay to discuss it in the following month. I mean, if you want to vote on commissioning to do something, you can do that as well, but it's certainly okay to bring this back up and put it back on the agenda again.
Okay. Well, board members, colleagues, I'm asking for also your opinion on this and seeing if this is something that we should possibly discuss in the following month after kind of having some more discussions, or commissioning someone to come with answers, or possibly being able to present or recommend a format for board evaluations on a monthly basis for our next meeting.
Well, I think this would be, I would, in my opinion, leave it up to some more discussion. I think I would want to know a little bit more. I just need a little more detail about this.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Good. Any other board members?
I think it would be a great idea, and yes, I look forward to helping you to find resources for that.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else to be said, the chair is seeking a motion to go into closed session, 610.02113 RSMO.
Mr. President, if I might, just before we if I might,
Yes, sir.
I don't want to go to the point of order and all that kind of stuff, but I think what being presented for closed session, Ms. Carla, or is that public session?
Closed session. I think I'm confused by your question, Mr. Brooks.
Where we passed the resolution to authorize you to write.
Oh, the letter.
Yes.
So yeah, that if you all were to have discussion on that, and that's not on your agenda this evening, that would be open session. Your agenda, your closed session item is a personnel.
Yes, well, I didn't know since you sent that out whether it was going to, I noticed it wasn't on the agenda, and I guess
Right.
I could move that it be added to the agenda, but I hate to see us wait another month before we, and the public ought to know about that.
I agree.
It seemed to me. I don't know how to deal with it at the end of the session there, but
President Watcher, before you move on to, I mean, that's another, you opened up for discussion about the board evaluation, and you mentioned having staff doing some support. I'm not clear exactly what you're asking staff to do.
So,
is there,
not so much as even staff, but possibly having a conversation with Ms. Johnson in regards of what would be needed for the for a monthly evaluation. What are the?
oh, okay. Are you
Yeah.
saying to come back with some strategies about doing a monthly evaluation for the board?
Yes, and administration input would also be welcome in that aspect.
Okay.
I think if I might, Mr. President, Ms. Barks is a good resource for that. She's the one that does board development.
Yes,
And I
sir.
think to have for the president to have conversation with her along with Ms. Carla, would I don't know too often how often employees evaluate their bosses. I don't know. They might
All the
fire
time,
me.
all the time, Mr. Brooks, all the time.
They might fire me, and I but anyway, I think that might be the first start, Mr. President, Mr. Watcher, is to contact Ms. Barks and tell of the suggestion that you had, and then bring it back to the board as to how we might do that.
Yes, sir. I agree. Thank you for the insight and input.
Yeah, and I think if I'm hearing right, I think Mr. Watcher was just saying to have a conversation inclusive of our board lawyer, Ms. Barks at MSBA, and then come back with some strategies that
Yes.
the board could review and decide on how the board wants to do their
Yes.
evaluation.
Yes,
But for
yes.
us to do the legwork, and I'd be happy to be a part of that. I've had some experiences with boards and on boards myself, and I would think the board would want something that's easy, quick, and effective that you'd want to utilize without going through a lot of extensive sort of criteria.
Now, if I might, Mr. President, back to the question of the resolution that we passed, asking authorizing the council to draft letters for the board in reference to the Senate bill that is before, I guess, for a House floor debate and pass out of committee without any voting or anything. I want to be within Robert's rules, but what do you suggest, Ms. Paula, how we deal with
Yeah.
that?
Carla, I was wondering if you had any suggestions on how we could go back on that.
So, I mean, certainly you can bring up additional items during your board meeting. You can move to amend your agenda. It's not something that's always favorable because you do want to be able to give your public notice of the items that you're going to talk about. And by amending the agenda, you're not able to do that. So my answer would be that you're allowed to do that. I will note that I have a differing opinion from MSBA on this issue. MSBA definitely recommends that boards not amend their agenda unless it's an emergency situation because it prevents the public from being notified of the issue. I mean, I have reviewed that statute. I have a differing opinion on that. I think that you do have some flexibility to do that. So, I'll leave it there, that it's up to you all. It's not on your agenda, so the public hasn't been notified of your intent to have the conversation. But I don't believe that I would argue and would feel comfortable with defending a position that that says that you can amend your agenda and have a discussion without fear of being in violation of the Sunshine Act.
All right.
That being said, Mr. President, and I don't know how other board members feel about it, but I'd like to move that we suspend the rule and that we add this item to the agenda where we have some brief discussion on the resolution that was passed unanimously authorizing council to write a letter on behalf of the board in our opposition to the Senate bill that's pending that takes away our public schools and turns them over to charter schools.
Okay. Yes, sir. So a motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Is there any discussion? All right. There's no discussion. We'll call it to a vote. Mr. Brooks,
Aye.
Mrs. Kendrick,
Aye.
Mrs. Carter, Ms.
Aye.
Carter, Mr. McGee,
Aye.
Ms. Graves, Mr. Townsend. Chair votes aye. Motion carries 5-0. Carla?
Okay, so Mr. Brooks, if I understand your request in the motion, you're asking that are you asking that I summarize the information that's in that letter?
Yes, ma'am. If you would, please.
Okay. So during our last meeting, we discussed Senate Bill 25, and which was a bill that was specifically designed to address charter school expansion. That bill has been combined with Senate Bill 23 and Senate Bill 55, and it's now Senate Bill 55. Senate Bill 55 has 6 provisions in it, all of which MSBA is opposing, and they're asking districts to contact their legislators and formally oppose the bill. At the last meeting, you all asked that I prepare a letter of opposition to Senate Bill 55, which I have prepared. And the letter outlines all 6 provisions and why the Board of Education is opposing them. I will very quickly go through them, and I have emailed all of you talking points that MSBA has prepared on, I believe, 4 of the 6 provisions, along with the letter of opposition. So the first provision is a school board member recall. provision, it basically says that a recall election of a school board member can occur if a petition is filed with signatures from voters, from 25% of the individuals who voted in the most recent school board election. A school board member could lose his or her seat if a majority of the voters cast, if the majority of the votes cast are in favor of removal. So unpacking that, if a member of the public believes that a school board member should be recalled, and there are specific reasons for recall that are extremely vague, it requires a petition of at least 25% of the individuals who voted in the last election. And then that issue, the recall of a director, can be put on a ballot and voted on. And so MSBA opposes it for several reasons that are included in the letter that I prepared. The first is that the recall, the reasons for the recall are extensive, broad, and undefined. They include examples like moral turpitude, abuse of power or authority, breach of public trust, lack of responsiveness to concerns raised by the public or staff. And there's no definition for what any of that means. So, it essentially provides individuals that are just upset about whatever to seek this petition and attempt to have directors that have been voted in removed. It makes the job of the school board member obviously difficult because there are decisions that you all make on sensitive issues, student discipline, closing buildings, moving attendance boundaries. I mean, there's a whole myriad of issues that you all could decide that could have any number of individuals in the community upset. And so our position and the position that I advocated in the letter was that it makes it more difficult for individuals to desire to run for this volunteer position for fear of being recalled. So that is the first provision. The second one is educational scholarship accounts and vouchers. So these education savings accounts have become popular across the country. There are vouchers that use public funds, that divert public funds for parents to pay tuition to private or parochial or homeschool. So the way Senate Bill 55 is drafted with regard to this provision is that these vouchers create up to $100 million in tax credits for donations to an organization that gives scholarships to students to attend homeschool or private school or virtual school. The bill was cleverly worded to pile the accountability measures for the organization issuing the scholarship, but there's really no accountability to the organization, to the school that's receiving it. So there's nothing that the bill prohibits any monitoring of the schools receiving the funds. The schools are not required to enroll all students. They're not audited. They're not required to conduct background checks on employees or use certified teachers. And so public funds are being used. The bill proposes that public funds be used for these tax credits for these organizations. And so for those reasons, I'm suggesting opposing that portion of the bill. The charter school expansion provision authorizes charter schools to be opened in an additional 61 school districts located in Jackson County, Jefferson County, St. Charles, and St. Louis counties, in any city that's over 30,000 students or more. So, as you all know, right now, charter schools are only allowed in the boundaries of Kansas City Public Schools and St. Louis Public Schools. And so this bill proposes to expand that to 61 additional school districts. The letter, in keeping with MSBA's position, suggests that, this should be opposed because charter schools aren't governed by an elected school board. They're not subject to the same accountability measures as public schools. Public schools are evaluated annually by DESE. Charter schools are not. State law requires that teachers in public schools are certified by the State Board of Education. In charter schools, up to 20% of teachers can be uncertified, and in foreign language charter schools, it could be even more. And then, the opening of charter schools virtually could really force consolidation of smaller school districts. This question of virtually opening charter schools is, I suspect, going to become a very hot conversation, and there's going to be lots of legislation that we're going to have to keep on top of, because there's going to be lots of different ways that the legislators are going to be trying to push this concept. Senate Bill 55 is one of those at this point. And so for those reasons, the letter proposes that this board would oppose that provision, the charter school expansion provision. The next provision involves turning MOCAP into virtual charter schools. So this provision allows students enrolling in MOCAP full-time to apply directly to the vendor, and it cuts out the resident school district and the professional educators. It cuts them out of the process. So the state would pay the MOCAP vendor the amount of state aid the resident district would have received, even though the vendor provides fewer services. So money would be coming directly out of the HMC1's budget to pay vendors who are providing services through a MOCAP virtual school. Vendors are allowed to drop students from the program if they're not performing well, as opposed to trying to help the students. DESE cannot remove a student from enrollment, even if there's evidence that the student isn't receiving the education. So MSBA's position, and I propose that this board's position be that this bill could create dozens of unregulated, overpaid virtual charter schools run by not-for-profit companies. The fifth provision is the withholding of state funds from members of MSHSAA. This provision allows state funding to be withheld from school districts who are a member of a statewide activities association if the district prohibits a homeschooled student from participating in events in the district. So, because I'm not aware of any districts that aren't part of a high school association, activities association, but that's what it's targeted towards. And that is not only sports, but arguably any activity, band. So what it does is it requires the district to allow students that are homeschooled to participate in district-wide activities, statewide activities. And if the district does not do so, then the district loses funds. And then the fifth provision limits the State Board of Education. This provision restricts members of the State Board of Education to serving only one full term. MSBA opposes this because it would remove experienced pro-public education representation from the State Board of Education. So everything that I just said is coming directly from the proposed letter that I sent you. It outlines, the reasons, it outlines all 6 of the provisions and the reasons for opposing those. I do not have information at this point about when this bill will actually go on the Senate floor. That's its next step as it's passed out of the Education Committee. And so the conclusion of the letter basically says that based upon the above, the HMC1 Board of Education urges you to oppose Senate Bill 55 and for hearings to be held on the provisions where public testimony has not been allowed. So I will stop talking. I have said a lot, and I, would be glad to break some of that down and put it into some kind of a presentation that you all can visually see, at your wish. But I'm certainly able to answer any questions about any of the provisions.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
if I might ask, I'd like to ask former State Rep, Mr. McGee, are you still on?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes, sir.
If you would, please, and thank you for responding here. And this is this an unusual move on the part of this body, the Senate, to do this? Because normally, isn't it the House and the Senate, and then there's a committee that comes up with it and refers it to one or the other. And apparently, if you could answer that for me, please, for us.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks, what was the question? I didn't hear you.
The question is that you've heard Ms. Carla's presentation in terms of this is passed out of committee without a vote, and it's now ready to go on the Senate floor, which is a little unusual, is it not? And is in most cases where both House and Senate take a bill up, and then it's conference committee, and then they come up with, they may differ, but they still come up with something that they present to both bodies for approval.
Right. Well, the conference committee doesn't happen until it passes. So the conference committee doesn't happen until it goes to the Senate. So
Yes.
They'll pass their version out in the Senate. They'll take it up in the House, and it'll go through committee, and then they will tag it up and make their own amendments. And then the House will pass its version of this bill. And then at that point, they'll come back and go to conference.
Conference, okay. Now, okay, let me ask you, I'm trying to expedite this because I don't want to keep everybody here all night, and I have an 8 o'clock I have to be on. Let me ask this. Do you think that we, based on that, do you think we have time enough for Ms. Carter for this to be on the official agenda at our February meeting, so she can show it a little more in depth? And all, I've read what she's prepared and agree with it, but it may be some further discussion. I guess, again, my question, is it something that we could hold until the next meeting? You think that nothing would happen while we're holding?
I think so, because the House and the House and Senate is taking time off about every other week because somebody's getting COVID.
Okay. Then would it be appropriate then that we just ask the president to table this until the next meeting for further discussion? Would that be, I would assume, Ms. Carla and Daron?
I mean, I think you could send Carla would have more of an idea of what MSBA is asking for. But my guesstimate is, I think it's okay to send the letter of our opposition to the bill, but I think, I don't think this bill is going to move between now and our next meeting.
I'm back to Carl, if you might, Mr. President. Are they what I can never remember those numbers unless those letters unless they're before me for some strange reason. I get a blockage there. But are they asking for ASAP on this, or do you feel that
So, I mean, the communication that I'm receiving from MSBA, and that I attended a legislative presentation at the end of last week on this bill that they did. They're encouraging it to be letters to start going immediately. But I don't have an answer, and I'm trying to find it on the Senate's website. I don't have an answer as to when this is moving. I'm not sure that MSBA knows. When I asked them last about it, they didn't know. I know the cooperative meeting is tomorrow, and there may be some additional information on the status of the bill.
Carla, I mean, are they asking us to send this to our local delegation? Who are they asking us to send the letter to?
Local delegation.
Well, I mean, that's kind of futile, but okay, I understand. But I mean, our local delegation doesn't support this.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, we're sort of preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
But I think, if I might, Mr. President and the Director McGee, I think we ought to send it to everybody. I mean, I think at least those on the Education Committee.
Well, that was my point. I think that's what you should send it to, is the people actually on the committee. I mean, I think you sent it to the local delegation, but I think you sent it to the folks on the committee that aren't from Kansas City, because you're telling them the impact of our area. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah. Then Mr. God, I hate to. Do we feel comfortable, my colleagues? Do we feel comfortable in authorizing this letter to be sent, but yet have, after Carla's meeting tomorrow, then have further discussion at the next meeting? This is so important to us as a district, so it's not something we ought to take very lightly. But I'm wondering whether or not we could just authorize her to go ahead and send the letter as had written, and then we have some further discussion on it and put it as an agenda item at the next meeting.
I would concur.
I would like, if I may, feedback from you all, feedback from the superintendent and whoever he feels on the executive leadership team should look at this and have some thought as well on it. I mean, this is my initial draft of a letter, but by no means do I think that, this is perfect and couldn't use input from the leadership team and the board.
Carla, I read it, I guess before the meeting. I will tell you, I would probably encourage you, and I don't know where you would cut. I would encourage you probably should cut it down. It's rather lengthy.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to get legislators to read a 3-page paper.
Okay.
So, I mean, again, I'm not telling you where to cut, but I would cut it down.
Okay.
It makes sense.
I'll certainly work on that.
So what are we, if I might ask, Mr. President, what are we saying? Should we send it after that has been cut down, or should we wait until the next board meeting?
Or I don't know where the board is, but I think that, I would advise Carla to cut it down, because we want them to read it. You want them to actually read it. I mean, or them or someone on their staff to read it. And so, like I said, I think being succinct is probably better here in this situation. But I also think this is not going to be this battle's not going to be won just by sending letters. But I mean, this bill, or form of this bill, has come up every year when I was in legislature. And so what really saved us before was that you had enough pro-public education Republicans in the House that basically didn't want charters in their suburban districts. Well, a lot of those folks are gone now. And so, and I would say, Dr. Cargile and Dr. Niblink, who was in center at the time, and Dr. Rodriguez in Grandview, and Dr. Riddell did a very good job of going and visiting with legislators in Jefferson City, talking about how it affected their area and meeting with legislators at the time. And so I would encourage the area superintendents to consider doing that again. So.
President Watcher, can I make a quick suggestion based on the comments that we've had here? I support with everything everyone's saying. I don't think there's anything wrong with Attorney Johnson sending an abbreviated letter forward and then putting on the agenda for next time. There's nothing holding us back from sending a second letter after our conversation. And also the superintendents we are meeting. There's a letter being sent from the Superintendent Association, and Coalition of Superintendents are also gathering to look at next steps as well too. We may have some more further information, but I think sending an initial letter saying halt, stop, and we're seriously considering this, and then follow up after our discussion, the board can take any other further action. So that shouldn't hold us from doing initial and then also having a conversation as we move forward.
Based on what the superintendent said, in order to move forward, I would move that we advise or authorize the council to modify the letter, send this letter in with notifying of our position, and then have this also further discussion on the February board meeting.
And let me ask this question, just as a clarifying question. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Brooks, indicate in your motion who you want me to send the letter to.
I would say at least send it to Duran, you can help, but I'd send it to the Education Committee of both houses. And isn't that the best way to do it, Duran?
Yeah, I'd send it to the Education Committee of both houses, and then I would make sure that someone from the board, either probably Carla or the superintendent, they should reach out to the ranking. I would at least reach out to the ranking Democrat on those committees as well, because they can give you some guidance on what the process is probably likely to be moving forward as well, or someone on their staff.
Okay. Did someone second that motion?
I'll second it.
There you go. We hadn't seconded the motion yet.
Okay.
But it's been moved and seconded, but do we have clarification on what that motion says and the aspect of it's being sent to the both of the Education Committee houses?
My motion, I think, was to authorize the council to send a modified version of the letter to the Education Committee in the House, Education Committee in the Senate, following with Director McGee's suggestion, and that the ranking minority member of both that are Democrats, both in the House and the Senate, be notified personally by either the superintendent or by you, Mr. President, or by council. I think we'll let you all make the decision on who that should be.
Okay. And Irene, that would be the motion that you're seconding, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. If there is no further discussion, we can call it to a vote. Ms. Kendrick?
Aye.
Mr. Brooks?
Aye.
Mr. McGee?
Aye.
Ms. Carter?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries 5-0. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the discussion, Mr. Brooks. Thank you for your insight, Ms. Johnson.
You're welcome.
So with that being said, I think we are to move into recess for closed session. The chair is seeking a motion to move into closed session 610.021 13 RSMO.
I move that we go into closed session 610.021 or 13 RSMO.
Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
All right, if it's been moved and seconded, with no further discussion, the chair will call it to a vote. Mr. McGee,
Aye.
Mr. Brooks,
Aye.
Mrs. Kendrick,
Aye.
Ms. Carter.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries 5-0. All right, I will see you guys on the other side. Those of you who stick around, see you in a minute.